What if I told you that luck isn't something that happens to you? What if I told you that the luckiest people alive, the ones who always seem to be in the right place at the right time, the ones who get the opportunities, the promotions, the breakthroughs, they're not special. They're not touched by the universe. They're not born under a lucky star. They just know something most people don't. And by the end of this, so are you. Let me take you to Las Vegas. Picture a roulette table. Late evening. The sound of chips sliding across felt. The hum of people placing their bets. Next to the narrator of this story is a man in a perfectly tailored suit, clean hair, professional looking in every way, except for one thing. He smells terrible. And not just a little. We're talking about the kind of smell that makes people lean away without knowing why. But here's the twist. When asked about it, the man smiles a little sheepishly, reaches down and pulls up his pant leg to reveal a pair of absolutely destroyed socks, grey-beige, riddled with holes, no elastic left in them. "Last washed 8 years ago," he says with a grin. "Gotta keep that luck juice." Now you might laugh at that. Most of us do. And yet if we're being honest, a lot of us aren't that different from that man. We have our lucky shirts, our lucky rituals before a big meeting. We avoid certain numbers, we knock on wood, we wish on stars. The question this book, The Science of Being Lucky by Nick Trenton, dares to ask is why? Why do we do this? And more importantly, is there actually a real, provable, scientific way to become luckier? The answer will genuinely surprise you. Here's the thing most self-help books won't tell you. Luck is real, and it matters far more than we ever give it credit for. Researchers at the World Bank found that 50% of the variation in people's income can be explained by one thing alone: the country they were born in. Not their intelligence, not their work ethic, just where they happened to come out of the womb. There's a study from the Journal of Economic Perspectives that found people with last names beginning with letters early in the alphabet were more likely to receive academic tenure. The luck of your surname. And then there's the mathematical model built by Italian researchers Pluchino, Raspiata, and Biondo, who ran a simulation of thousands of careers over 40 years. They wanted to know what actually predicts success, not talent, not hard work, luck. Specifically, they found that mediocre but lucky people almost always outperform talented but unlucky ones. The most successful people in any population were not the smartest or the most hardworking. They were the ones who happened to encounter the most lucky events. Now, before you throw up your hands and say, "So, what's the point then?" Hold on. Because this is where the story gets interesting. The question isn't whether luck matters. It clearly does. The question is, can we engineer it? Can we deliberately position ourselves to catch more of those lucky breaks? And the answer, backed by real psychology and real science, is yes. Luck, as the ancient philosopher Seneca said, is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. We can't manufacture the opportunity, but we can absolutely control the preparation. Before we get into the how, let me tell you a story about a scientist named Albert Hofmann. In the 1940s, Hofmann was working on a compound he had synthesized a few years earlier and then shelved, a little thing called LSD-25. Nobody thought it was special. The lab had tested it, found no immediate medical use, and moved on. But Hofmann couldn't let it go. There was something about it, a gut feeling, a pull he couldn't explain rationally. So in 1943, he went back to it. And one afternoon in the lab, he accidentally absorbed a tiny amount through his fingertips. He had to leave work early, feeling disoriented and strange. He went home by bicycle, his notes say the world around. Him was wavering and distorted, familiar objects becoming grotesque and animated. It was the first recorded LSD trip in human history, and it happened entirely by accident. But here's what matters. It only happened because Hofmann was curious. Because he stayed open when everyone else had moved on. Because he was willing to follow a thread that had no obvious destination. That's the heartbeat of what this book is really about. The luckiest people in history weren't passive recipients of cosmic favor. They were people who stayed curious, stayed open, took zigzag paths, and trusted instincts that didn't always make sense on paper. Steve Jobs once took a calligraphy class. A completely random decision, no practical use at the time. 10 years later, it became the foundation of the Mac's revolutionary typography, the thing that defined Apple's identity and changed the entire computer industry. Looking forward, the dots never connect. Looking backward, they always do. The question is whether you're willing to collect the dots. Psychologist Richard Wiseman spent 10 years studying luck. hundreds of interviews, dozens of controlled experiments, and what he found wasn't mystical at all. In one famous experiment, he asked volunteers to walk to a nearby coffee shop. He placed money on the ground in their path. He planted a successful businessman inside the cafe. One volunteer, someone who described himself as lucky, noticed the money, pocketed it, and spontaneously struck up a conversation with the businessman while waiting for his drink. The other volunteer, who described herself as unlucky, walked right over the cash and sat alone in silence. Same environment, same opportunity, completely different outcomes. Wiseman's conclusion was this: lucky people are not more fortunate, they are more open, more relaxed, more aware. And this comes down to 3 core personality traits. The first is extroversion, and I don't mean you have to be loud or the life of the party. I mean being willing to talk to people, to share what you're working on, to ask a stranger a question. Because here's the truth: so much of what we call luck actually comes from other people. A connection, a referral, a piece of information overheard in a conversation. The more people you engage with, the more channels exist for luck to find you. The second trait is open-mindedness. Lucky people don't white-knuckle their plans. They say yes to things that don't immediately make sense. They follow their curiosity down unexpected hallways. They treat life like an adventure rather than a checklist. The person who's too rigidly focused on the goal misses every interesting thing that happens on the way there. The third trait, and this one surprises people, is low anxiety. Wiseman ran an experiment where he hit a headline on page 2 of a newspaper that said, "Stop counting, there are 43 photographs." Right next to it, another headline, "Tell the experiment you've seen this and win $250. Everyone missed both, so stressed about counting correctly that they literally could not see a $250 gift sitting right in front of their faces. That is what anxiety does to luck. When we're wound tight, scanning the world for threats, managing our worry, we close ourselves off to the unexpected. And the unexpected is where luck lives. Relaxation is not laziness. It is the state in which luck becomes visible. Now here's where things get philosophically beautiful. The playwright Tennessee Williams once said, "Luck is believing you are lucky." There's a study from the University of California where 2 groups of students were asked to visualize ahead of an exam. The first group visualized themselves acing it, feeling great, getting the grade they wanted. The second group visualized themselves actually studying, seeing themselves at the desk, working through the material, preparing thoroughly. The first group studied the least and got the worst grades. The second group studied more and scored higher. There's a lesson here that cuts through all the noise about positive thinking. Wishing for the outcome doesn't help. Imagining the process does. And yet, belief itself is not nothing. Economist Alan Kerman discovered something quietly profound. He found that people who believed they were lucky at finding parking spaces actually found more of them, not because the universe gave them parking spaces, but because they looked confidently where unlucky people had already given up. They moved through the world with eyes open, expecting good things, and that expectation changed their behavior in tiny but powerful ways. It's called the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you walk into a room believing bad things are about to happen, your body tightens, your eyes narrow, your voice changes. You radiate a closed, defensive energy. And people respond to that. Opportunities close like flowers in the cold. But if you walk in believing things tend to go your way, not in a naive, delusional sense, but in a quiet, grounded way, something different happens. You notice more. You smile more naturally. You take a chance on a conversation you might have otherwise avoided. This is what Wiseman found when he created his Luck School, a program where he trained so-called unlucky people to adopt the mindset of lucky people. He had them keep journals. Write down the best thing that happened each day. Look for silver linings. Act more openly. 80% of them reported afterward that they were happier and luckier. Same world. Different lens. So how do you actually expand your luck in practical everyday terms? There's a concept called the luck surface area, coined by a man named Jason Roberts. His formula is beautifully simple. Luck equals doing times telling. Imagine a graph. On one axis is how hard you're working towards something you care about. On the other is how many people know about it. How openly you're sharing your passion, your work, your struggles, your goals. Most people fall into one of 2 traps. They work incredibly hard in private, never talking about what they're building. Then they wonder why lucky breaks never seem to find them. Luck can't reach you if no one knows you exist. Or they talk about their dreams constantly but never actually do the work. They attend the networking events, they post about their goals, they describe the book they're going to write someday. But without the doing, the telling is hollow. The lucky person does both. They work, they build, they practice, they fail and try again. And then they talk about it enthusiastically, honestly, with anyone who might listen. They don't wait until they're perfect. They share the work in progress. Think about the wildlife photographer who wins a prestigious award for a perfect shot of a bird mid-flight. That moment looks like pure luck. But behind it were hundreds of imperfect shots, years of competitions entered and lost, hours in editing software, weekends of learning. And then, at the awards ceremony, the photographer talks animatedly about their work to anyone nearby, and meets a filmmaker who says, "I'd love someone like you on my next project." Was that luck? Yes. Could it have happened without the hard work, the portfolio, and the willingness to open up and share? Absolutely not. Your luck surface area is something you build every single day. Researcher and author Max Gunther spent his career mapping out the habits of genuinely lucky people, and he identified something that might be the most counterintuitive finding in this entire book. Lucky people are a little bit pessimistic. Now, before that derails everything we've talked about, let me explain. Lucky people hope for the best, but they plan for the worst. They cross their T's. They have the backup plan. They know what they'll do if things go sideways. And because they've done that thinking in advance, they're not paralyzed by fear when things do go wrong. They just act. Gunther also observed something he called the zigzag path. The most successful, luckiest people he studied rarely got where they ended up through a straight line. They took detours, changed careers, followed odd instincts, said yes to invitations that seemed irrelevant. When you look at their lives in hindsight, it all connects. But in the moment, it looked like chaos. The luckiest response to that chaos is not to fight it. It's to loosen your grip on the steering wheel and let the road take you where it needs to. And then there's serendipity. Those moments when life hands you something unexpected and beautiful, and the only question is whether you have the awareness to catch it. Christian Busch, author of The Serendipity Mindset, breaks serendipity down into 3 ingredients: the trigger, the connection, and the value. Something unexpected happens. You draw a link between it and something else in your life, and then you find the potential hidden inside that link. This requires one thing above all others: curiosity. The person who walks through life with their eyes wide open, genuinely interested in other people, genuinely open to being surprised. That person will experience more serendipity in a single week than the person who walks the same path, head down, every single day. Because serendipity doesn't go to the closed door. It goes to the one that's open. Let me leave you with this. There's a Croatian man named Frano Selak who has been called both the luckiest and unluckiest man in the world. He survived a train wreck, a plane crash, 2 car accidents, and a bus plunge into a river. He walked away from each one. And then, at the age of 73, he won $1 million in the lottery. And there's 2U, a scientist in 1969 with no postgraduate degree, no research experience, and no academic standing. She was handed a nearly impossible mission: find a cure for malaria. She spent years testing thousands of compounds. She found a clue in a 1,500-year-old Chinese text. She redesigned her entire experiment. She even infected herself with malaria to test the cure when no one else could. Decades later, her drug had been administered more than 1 billion times. She won the Nobel Prize. Were both of them lucky? In different ways, yes. But here's what separates the stories. 2U built something with her luck. She showed up every day, even when it seemed impossible. She stayed open to a single line in an ancient text. She trusted an instinct that made no sense to anyone around her. Luck is what you catch when you're in motion. You will not find it by sitting still and hoping. You will not find it by visualizing the destination while ignoring the road. You find it by showing up, curious, open, consistent, connected, and trusting that the dots you're collecting today will connect in ways you can't possibly see yet. Start by believing you're lucky, then act like it. Talk about what you're building. Stay in the room a little longer. Follow the weird instinct. Say yes to the thing that doesn't quite make sense. Keep a journal of what's already going right. Plan for the worst and walk forward expecting the best. Because here's the truth that this book arrives at, quietly and powerfully: you were never waiting for luck. Luck was waiting for you.
Winners learn daily. Subscribe and be one of them.